So, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today at the Delta Live Milano studio. This is the third day of our conference, this is our Archi Talks. The first day we had a day curated by UN Studio and on Light Beyond the Light subject. The second day, yesterday, we had some very interesting talk about architectural projects. Give the words to our speakers. Thank you very much.
Can I start? Yes? Yeah? Yes. Yeah, okay. Thank you for inviting me. Hope you enjoy Milano. And somebody the other day said that design is dead. But when you see so many people in one town, obviously design is just about to begin, I think. So I want to talk to you today about the lighting industry, and I want to talk to you about my experiences with lighting industry and what I think about the future and the present of the process of designing a light fitting and where I think it's going. So this is what I found by McKinsey, a company, saying that it is, you know, innovation very difficult for well-established companies, and they are better executors than innovators, which means that you know, everybody today is pretty much being a copier of a copier, and you know that. So when you look at the fairs like Frankfurt or Milano, it's rare that you come up and across a company that makes something that is really new and innovating, and something that is pushing the boundaries towards the future about the use of light fitting in a different way. The objective difficulties in developing new product obviously are that research and development are very long process and very expensive. The reason why many companies copy the product is because it's easier. But the future of that particular company is probably not going to be very bright, because they end up talking about price. And when you talk about price, and where price is the only criteria, sooner or later somebody is going to manufacture something that is cheaper than you, and you practically don't have a bright future. And my opinion is that since the LED came out on the market, 50% of the companies today that exist and manufacture lighting didn't exist 10 years ago. And it's very probable that from 10 years from now, they will not exist also. The other thing is that source is constantly changing. You know, the little chip that we are using, it's very difficult for a manufacturer to really test a fitting and then to put it in the market and provide an exact data for the specifier, because that particular source is probably going to change in 6 months or a year. So they can't stock things anymore. That's why I think that this unpredictable thing that's happening with the basic of every light fitting that is in the market is something that hopefully in 5 years is going to stop. We're going to reach a certain level of lumen output, and then manufacturers will be able to start thinking about quality of light. Also, uneducated and confused market. You know that whoever, I assume that most of you are specifiers here, designers, and you work with light. I assume that you know by now what it means today to explain something to your client. It's very difficult, and they don't trust you, because there are so many other people who are selling fittings that they will convince your client that that fitting is the same as the one you specified. And you know that in many occasions is absolutely not true. Then price. Price obviously is more important than the quality, and that's because of lack of education. So price is the, something that's running the world of lighting today in many cases, because it's not only about lighting, it's also in architecture, interior design, and so on and so on, because we have so many speculative investors today that don't really care. They want to do their thing, they're building the investment the cheapest possible, the return on the money as fast as possible. So in that area and in that environment, creativity and design doesn't really have its place where it should be. And then when you design something, when you invent something, intellectual property is extremely difficult to protect. I know because I've been going through this process. And once you start going through this process, it takes at least 3 years until you get an answer from the institution that will control if that product is maybe in conflict with another similar product or it's not. And by the time you did it, it's already old. By the time manufacturer really produces something, it takes 2 years. So once you invented something, it's obviously invented for a period where we are now, or maybe for the period where we're going to be in a few years. But by the time the product is out, it's already old. Somebody found out about it, made a copy, and then you have a serious problem marketing that. Subjective difficulties with manufacturers are the lack of understanding of form of light. Because everybody when goes to the stands and look at the fittings, most of us, they look at the fitting itself. And very few people think about the form of light that exits the actual fitting and its function when it's on. That is still something that is very common in our case, in our business. And innovation in form is rare because it's much easier to copy an existing form. And you know how many retrofits are on the market today, which only replace the existing source with the new source, which is LED. You saw so many times, something that looks like a fluorescent tube, but actually has a little dots inside. Or it's much easier just to have a simple downlight, which until yesterday used a dichroic, and now it uses the same, but it's only LED. And of course, reluctance in hiring designers. I think lighting designer is the one who, during the process of lighting design, experimenting, specifying, knows really best which form of the light, which quality of light is adequate for that particular space, for that particular function, and not the manufacturer, because a lot of manufacturers do not come from the lighting world, they come from manufacturing world, and they are two different worlds. And fear of new, everybody fears that if I come up with something new, something different, nobody's gonna buy it. And that obviously is a very serious problem, because something that is new, something that is different and innovating is not something that will give you return in a short time. It takes time to market, to explain, to make people understand what the product is all about, especially if it has a little bit different functions than all the products that are in the market today. So yes, the lighting industry is going through constant source evolution, we know that, and it's happening by itself, but we do need to start thinking about the luminary revolution, because most of them, as I said, are built around old sources. So starting point of a lighting fixture design should be to evaluate its functional purpose primarily, application within the context of space, time, and human needs, because we, lighting designers, too often gather together on conferences, we talk to each other, we convince each other about the quality of light, we talk to each other. Manufacturers are more busy selling, making money and selling, but nobody really invests in public awareness of the real quality of light. And we need to take into account what we learned in the past 100 years. And seems like lately that we forgot. I've seen so many things on the market and so many projects that absolutely have no sense in what we've learned in the last 100 years, what lighting is all about, how it influences human beings, what we do really consider a quality light. So I'll tell you a few facts. A fact is, it's recently published that in road lighting in European Union is worth about 520 million euros per year. That's a lot of money. 1.5 million kilometers of roads need to be illuminated. And we have about 2.38 million fittings sold. So I don't know how many of you here are manufacturers, except a few guys from Delta Light, but this is a quite serious business, because 91% of them are replacement and only 4% currently are LEDs. So there is a lot of work to be done in that particular area. Another fact is that there is absolutely no investment in public awareness of importance of quality lighting, and it's just absolutely non-existent. Nobody talks to the public. I told this many times to manufacturers when we had some meetings and gatherings. If you would invest a little bit of your money into not just marketing of your product, but into explaining to a general public what quality lighting is all about, your business will probably grow. Because then the public will demand quality light. You know how many times you've seen in a restaurant, like I was last year, I don't know when, in Trastevere in Rome, and those little beautiful restaurants, all of them, they had this PLC light bulb, you know, the little pigtails, and I think they were like 6,000 K or something like that. It was terrible, you know, and that guy at the same time is burning electric oven and making pizzas. You know, that oven is going to burn a million times more electric energy than those bulbs. But nobody explained to these guys that he's not going to save any energy, and nobody explained to him that he's just going to ruin the whole atmosphere in his restaurant by putting those bulbs. And today, they're changing those and putting the cheapest LEDs because they're going to save some energy. So the only criteria is actually energy savings, but nobody really explained to people the reality of energy saving in residential and such areas like hospitality and homes. And that's because, you know, the light bulb manufacturers, they want to sell more light bulbs, and, you know, they are okay with that. So if we know all this, you know, there is a way of creating value by adding complexity to the whole thing. Because we are today, based on the facts that I showed you before, we are still treating public lighting as we did in the 19th century. Nothing really changed. The concept is the same. We have pole here, pole there, we turn on the light when the sun goes down, and we turn it off when the sun comes up. So I think that we should start thinking about a completely new way of public lighting, which considers a certain, you know, it follows the human activity, its seasonal activity during the night, in which we can really take care of much of the energy saving problem, and we can also take care of much of the light pollution problem. I'm not going to get into light pollution because that's a very touchy topic. But you see, during the winter, this line here is actually showing that we turn on the light, it goes on, it stays on all night. Instead of that, we can have this dynamic light, which will follow the nocturnal activity, and then during the summer it's completely different. See, so this is the way in which we can, you know, save a lot of energy. And new norm N13201 now, for the first time in 2019, is talking about implementation of dynamic lighting. So there is a way of, you know, sustainable and adaptive lighting design strategy for 21st century, and is based on the topographic methodology that we developed that is talking about lighting as a dynamic grid. So you can talk about a light fitting by itself. It's a grid that functions under certain conditions. So this conditional logic in this dynamic grid actually creates this light topography where light is following the presence of cars, the presence of people, follows the seasons, follows the exact function at the exact time of the night. We tried to do this test in our town, Pula, and see here, this is a clock ticking, and now we have, you know, various different zones in our town, and they are functioning under that principle. And you can see here that different zone is consuming different amount of energy depending on the time of the night, and of course depending on the time of the season. So at one point you can see that most of the public lighting in town is maybe at 10 or 20%, and then when people start waking up in the morning, going to work, it starts raising up, and this is where we can actually save enormous amount of energy, and then of course reduce the problem of light pollution. But in order to do that, we need some light fittings. You know, they have to be smart. So when we talk about smart lighting, you know, we usually talk about an existing fitting that we add a lot of electronics to it. But that smart lighting should be a little bit more than that. It should be designed. So remember a few years ago, actually 2 years ago, we presented Polizano, and this is what I want to talk about now. That fitting is actually designed around a smart lighting in public spaces. Back then, I showed this video in which I tried to explain the actual function of this fitting, which was that you can have each head, you know, moved in every direction that you want, and practically have various different optics depending on what you want to lit. Is it the wall, is it the house, is it the street, is it the path, you know, whatever you want to do, a landscape. But the most important part was this, according to everything that I said so far. It is that you can actually add all these things to have smart lighting, but the whole aesthetics of that fitting remains the same. Because today, you will see a lot of fittings that have, you know, light, they just put things on it. Then they put the Wi-Fi repeater on the pole, then they put a lot of sensors on the pole, and it looks like a mess. This is something that was designed around that. And the first project, the dynamic lighting, 2 years ago, you know, we always change, you know, we have the fitting and we have the pole. Somebody sells the pole, the other guy sells the fitting. And then somebody else sells the sensor, and then somebody else sends a video camera, and then you put all this together and it becomes ugly. You know, when you have a nice urban areas, this is, you know, everything that pole should have. You know, it should be designed. This is what I always try to provide it with Polizano. We actually illuminated the street, the green area, the castle, and everything with the same fitting. We had a little bit of argument with, you know, conservation agency, because they said, well, this is very modern, and in such an old, you know, environment, it doesn't really fit together. But the question is, you know, we are doing this today. You know, nobody ever put anything similar or anything like that in this area here. So we are doing something today. So why should we try to do something that was done 150 years ago and make it look similar, because it's fake. So if we are doing something today, I think it should be something that is of our time. Another project in which we have experimented with all this system and dynamic lighting and so on is here. Again, you see this road going up to this little town. We kind of try to extend the visual perception of this road by illuminating the trees here, by illuminating all the, you know, the landscape to make it look a little bit better. But because we live in the era of accelerated obsolescence, which means that everything we see today, for us, it's boring tomorrow. So we needed to do a system that will be continuously different and changed according to the season, according to the film festival, according to how many tourists are there. So we actually designed the entire town to be a dynamic lighting system that can accommodate every single change that at certain, you know, time is required. With that, we can have not only this theatrical approach where the lighting itself becomes something for why people would come and visit this little town, but it can also, at the same time, reduce all the negative impact when it comes to energy and everything else at the same time. So when we have light under control like this, you know, then we can really play with this light, and we can provide all kinds of different scenes, and we can create that the entire town becomes a little theater which people would visit. And you know, there are a lot of other positive aspects of this project here, which I'm not going to get into right now. But basically, this is the key point of creating this dynamic dynamic story in this little town here. So the other night I'm talking to my dear friend Pietro Castiglioni, and he said, "Dean, luminaire design is dead." So Pietro, you know, I'm not sure about that. You know, what do you mean? He says, "Yes, luminaire design is dead. You see, nobody thinks about housing anymore. You know, we're just talking about the actual form of light." And I says, "Well, that's the whole point, Pietro." So I have to disagree with him. And I think that the real point about luminaire design is the form of light that comes out of the housing, and that the housing naturally should be appealing to a client or us who are specifying this. But the basic principle of design lighting should be definitely a function and should be a quality of light. So we are now working on a Polizano bollard, but that's not the point. The point is that, you know, we can have a various different optic systems in the bollard, which looks like, you know, maybe to some people, why would we do something like that? But you know, if you really care, if you really are a true lighting designer, then your project is always going to be site-specific. It's never a repetition of, you know, regardless of the space where you are. It's always site-specific. So, for example, here, if you light up this with always the same optics, this is what's going to happen. You know, you're going to have these black holes, but if you have optics that are precisely positioned there, then you are able to control that, and you can have a nice uniform illumination. And then the other thing is that we can actually have this dynamic light, which is not necessarily on 100% all night, which can actually function as I was showing you before, that depending on the day, a time of the night, it can be reduced and so on and so on. So technology today does allow us to do things that it was unthinkable until a decade ago. I just heard on CNN today that they put human DNA in monkeys, in their brains. And now there is this big discussion, you know, what's going to happen with the monkey? And then the other guy said, what's going to happen with us if we put monkey's DNA in us? You know, so technology today really changed dramatically. For the Biennale of Architecture in Venice, my friend printed this entire structure, which we worked on it as illumination. So this is printed, you know, it's not built. So today this technology really allows us to do a lot of things, but it seems like that the industry of lighting in many cases is not really following the technological possibilities that the world we have today. So we should ask ourselves, you know, is the present, you know, the reality, and is this the way to the future? You know, what is our true legacy? What is it that we, who are influencing the industry, how can we provide something that industry will grow? You know, we talk about among each other all the time, and it's also our fault because we also don't have that many chances to speak to the public. We don't have too many chances to speak to the ones who are making decisions. We are not educating them. So what happens is that at the end, that most of the manufacturers should ask themselves, you know, are they want to be a leader or they want to follow followers? Because this is mostly what today in the market we have. We are, you know, many of them are following followers. And the solution for that is absolutely not that we do, you know, everything what I want. You know, the solution is the cooperation, and that I think is the key. And for the younger generations, I would like to say that you should not educate yourself out of creativity. Because I think the creativity is the only thing that nobody can take away from you, and the creativity is the only most important thing that will take us in a better future. Because I think that the future relies on natural aristocracy of talent, like Frank Lebowitz would say, and I strongly believe in that. So, thank you very much.
Ready? Now we carry on with some case histories. I choose 3 different case histories just to demonstrate that a lighting designer can create a real added value to his project. Okay, Dean, you talk about creativity. I want to underline this concept. In my opinion, a lighting designer must exercise his right to be creative. To be creative means not only to create new shapes, new aesthetic core aspects, but functional as well. Nowadays, the demand of bespoke luminaires is increasing more and more. In my opinion, the increasing of this demand can be justified by 2 different concepts. First one, sometimes you are not able to find specific performances from a standard luminaires. And nowadays it's possible to create good luminaires in a, let me say, in a very easy way, because technology is really well spread, and it's easier than in the past to create good luminaires. In good luminaires, I underline this aspect. It means reliability, in terms of reliability, because we know very well that the problem of LED is reliability in terms of color stability, color flux maintenance, and so on and so on. Other aspects, unfortunately, the most part of manufacturers are marketing oriented. That's why the design attitude is increases. It's not dead, but it's increases. We have to edit another aspect. In many countries, manufacturers become lighting designer, and this strongly reduces the possibility to grow in terms of new proposal, in terms of a new approach to lighting design. Okay, carry on with the first one. The first case history. Okay, LED was not yet created, and this is a halogen lamp project. But I think it's very didactic because mechanically speaking, it was really a big challenge. The device includes aluminium bars, aluminium equipped beams, and a retractable fixture. We did it in a sort of renewing project for Palazzo Grassi. The architect in charge was Tadao Ando, and we carried on this project with him. And it was a pleasure, really a pleasure to work with him. The problem was that he only speaks Japanese, but I am Napolitan, so I can make myself understandable by signs. You know. And okay, basically, Tadao approach is a minimal approach to architecture, and this aspect for us was really difficult to conjugate because he required very simple solutions. I used to say that very interesting ideas can come from Scrabbles, simple Scrabbles. Everything starts with the Scrabbles. And the blue one is Tadao Scrabble. The black one is my Scrabble. And Japanese and Napolitan comes together. And basically he required something very simple, and we decided to create these aluminium beams. Two different versions. The first one was built in. The second one was a little delay. The second one was a bracket beam version. A further complication was to bring the beams into the building, and Venice is difficult from this side. From this point of view, everything is complicated. So we decided to go in through the windows. Consider that the longest beam was more than 10 meters. Basically, we decided to create a retractable luminaire. When the luminaire is switched off, it's inside. And we created a manual system to heat the luminaire. Then we provide for a specific no glare, anti-glare system with the sort of rotating, adjustable loop anti-glare screen. And then we tried to declinate a sort of a specific, very simple cylindrical lumina, equipped with dimming. And basically, we found this solution, and we realized the mock-up. And basically, the result is practically, let me see. Okay, when the luminaire is switched off, it's inside the beam. And we create a sort of wiring system to go from one side to the other one. So in this, we solved a lot of wiring problems in terms of electricals, in terms of, let me say, video, in terms of alarm sensors and so on. In the end, we had specific different solution in terms of length. For very, very, very long distances, we used brackets. This is to avoid the amount of declination, you know, when you have in a sort of bending in your beam. So we decided to accept no more than 25 millimeters of declination of the beam. That's why we needed a sort of bracket for distances longer than 8 meters. Okay, in the end, this is the current lighting is existing now, it's working. And this was the previous lighting system. As you can see, the concept, the lighting concept, the photometric concept is completely different, because we want to achieve a specific accent patterns, practically impossible with this layout. Second case history. Okay, we realized this museum lighting in 3-4 years, and this museum is located in the center of Milan. It's very close to Piazza della Scala. Piazza della Scala. We used to say that it's not a museum, this is an house museum, because you will see we have a lot of different type of works of art, tridimensional, bidimensional, and different levels of exhibition. So it's a certain house, but to be honest, it started like a house. It was an heritage of a very, very rich man, a Milanese man, and this was the house of this man. So everything is the same in terms of location. Unfortunately, during the war, it was almost destroyed. So we decided to create a sort of hanging luminaires. Okay, this is the layout. This developing on 2 different piano terra and first floor. And this was the previous lighting system. Okay. In the end, in the past, they solved everything only with 2 luminaires, and it was difficult to read the details in the pictures. Anyway, we decided to change the approach. And for weight reasons, we had the limit from the hanging ceiling structure was no more than 30 kilos. So we decided to create this structure in carbonium, not to exceed 30 kilos limit. So we draw completely brand new details, everything, and pressed with molding devices and created the structure. You will see in the end. In the end, they paint in white, but you can recognize the material is carbonium. Just an explanation. The specific weight of carbonium is almost 40% less compared with aluminum. We are talking of 1.7 instead of 2.9. That means that for Palazzo Grassi nowadays, if we have to build again this luminar solution, we can do in carbonium, saving a lot of money as well. And this is the luminar. Okay, the luminar, we designed completely brand new luminar, of course. LED 4-channel luminar with the specific LED, 4 different LED with the sync system, and very reduced weight, because in the end of the story we have almost 2 meters long legs, let me say. So we need very small weight into in the end of the leg, with the arm, sorry. And the second one, we provide for a color setting, managing each different channel to reach a specific color in terms of color temperature, but in terms of content of lighting radiation as well. And the method we applied was to measure for some pictures, to measure specific color with the contact spectrophotometer. In such a way, we achieved the specific reflected response for each samples. And in the end of this, we created a sort of specific palette, core palette. Okay. Very often I used to say a lot of standards are completely out of time. Nowadays we use the same color assessment standards. They are old like hell. That's it. So why have to? I don't want to take a specific standard, old standard for my color rendition. A specific reference. It's very simple because you can have the reference and test measurement, and you can have the gap in terms of color shift. And we used the CIE brand new perception color systems, not only 1967, we used the Delta E and Delta 1000, because as you know, this kind of referment considered the perception of the sample not only isolated, but in regarding with the color ambient and regarding with the luminance level adaptation, and so on and so on. Okay, we create a specific software to judge this aspect. And in the end, this is the final curve, LED curve, matched with the incandescent lamp. So we tried to stay at the same 2856 Kelvin, to stay very close, But the further complication was, you will see in this house, museum, we have a lot of different colors in walls. So I noticed that even with the same type of radiation, same type of light, the color rendition of picture was really different because the indirect contribution of the walls was too strong. It's a big problem, not small problem. So that's why we created 4 channels luminaire, just for adjusting the radiation emitted from the luminaire, just to compensate the indirect contribution coming from the walls and ceiling. And in the end, we reached the real simple reflection curve, due not only from the direct lighting, that means that from the direct reflection in direction of the viewer, but from indirect contribution as well. Okay, we checked everything with the spectrophotometer on the place and blah 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 blah. So this is the final result. You can see the 2 meters arms. Oh, this is a very good advantage because you strongly reduce the glare phenomena. The closer you stay on the picture, the better it is in terms of glare reduction. And you can see in the end the management device with the 4 channel, just to set to match the exactly the lighting radiation on the picture. That's it. Look at this color is completely reddish. If I use the same luminaire, the result on the picture is completely wrong. That's why we had to adjust the output of the luminaire in terms of radiation. And this is just to explain. Look at, this is an house museum, 3-dimensional, bidimensional, 3 levels for exhibitions, completely very strange museum. But for sure, if you succeed in this lighting, so in this lighting approach, you can have a good result for a normal, usual museum. Okay, we had fun to create. It was the period that they say no, LED, it's dangerous. Van Gogh became yellow, blah blah blah. Bullshit. As Dean, unfortunately, you don't pay for speaking. That's it. You can speak, you can talk, easy, and you can say anything you want. That's it. So a lot of people talk about items completely far from the knowledge that they have. That's it. But practically, I demonstrate, according with the CIE 157 standard, that in the end, it's less dangerous as the system, comparing with the same illuminance level, is less dangerous and LED compared with the incandescent lamp with halogen with glass, UV glass in front. That means brand new technology halogen lamp. So forget about damage. Third and last. The airport of Malpensa, we took care from renewing in lighting, and it was a huge project. First of all, because the ceiling is, I think, 10 meters high, and we need a lot of luminous flux. Because according with the international aviation standards, you have to guarantee, let me say, 300 lux. Let me say, the light you need, but in terms of standard, if we talk in terms of rigorous, serious people, in engineering, they demand 300 lux. So we need a lot of luminous flux, and we decided to create this specific luminaire in different patterns, and this is sort of abat-jour, big abat-jour, for create an ambient, a different ambient in the arrival in the Schengen zone. Okay, the airport was built in 1998. The project was by the Ettore Sources, and they decided to renew for Expo in Milano. So new, old solution, new one. The same for arrival, new, the old one, new one. I want to underline this luminaire, let me say, this wing luminaire. It's the most crazy thing I did in my life, in terms of professional activity. No, but to be honest, the idea was not mine, but came from my colleague Cinzia. The problem is that, technically speaking, I have to solve the problem. So, consider that the biggest is 6 meters long. So, okay, the rendering, the customer was very, very happy. Everything. Let's go. First of all, the layout. Okay, we decided to create a specific pattern, 1 meter per 1 meter, fitted with 1, 2, 3 until 9 recessed luminaires. We decided to use a special, to design a special luminaire because we need a lot of luminous flux. At that time, the recessed luminaires was no more than 9 or 10,000 lumen. So we decided to put inside something about 20,000 lumen luminaire. But we provide for heat pipe, a specific driver, blah, 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 blah. Consider that 3 years ago, the market in the sense of LED, in the sense of the power of unit, was a little bit lower, let me say, lower and lower. So it was difficult to find the recessed luminaire with very high lumen power. And second, we decided to arrange on column, on 10 columns, to arrange these specific wings to give a sort of character to the airport. Okay, so we designed 3 different sides, and we started with the project. Okay, we realized in fiberglass, pressed fiberglass with the epoxy resin, but you can see the way to build this object is the same, is very close to a real wing. You can see the ribs. We had limit in weight in this case as well. The biggest, okay, I will talk a little bit later. Okay, this is the wiring, and this is another specific luminaire in the wing. Consider that the surface is not plain, so to match the slope, the local slope of the wing, we created a sort of a triangle brick, let me say, adjustable with the 3 screw, sort of joke, crazy joke. Yeah? And okay, this is the biggest, no more than 80 kilos overall. Oh, it's working now. We had no problem with LED, with nothing. Just to say that if you provide for a good project, nowadays you can have a good bespoke look, more than in the past. Okay, ready to fly. You know, the airport standards requires a lot of demand. They have a lot of demands, so they made a special mock-up with 80 kilos on the extreme of the on the end of the wing, vibrating and so on and so on and so on. You can imagine in an airport. And okay, this is the custom lumina. You can see a specific sinking aluminum module, optical opalescent model sheet, and okay, specific LED, blah 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 blah. But we left a sort of gap, sort of into the place, because we need a sort of refreshing, of conventional refreshing of the air. Okay, this is the final layout of luminaires on per each wings and wiring as well. This is the final result. The last is the general lighting solutions. Is the last luminaire, bespoke luminaire I want to talk about. As you can see, we create a sort of square luminaire in which you can fit 1 till 9, almost 20,000 lumen recessed luminaire. And we installed 400 luminaires in the whole airport. That's why we need very, very high luminous flux. You can imagine if we had the half of the luminous flux per unit, we had to install 800 fittings. Just to say that the technology quantity is strictly related with the quality of the light installations. We cannot separate it. Yeah? This is the demonstration of this. Okay, this is the way to put on. Okay, you can see the heat pipe, you can see the recessed solution, and the detail for mounting for the square, the hole, the squared hole, and different configurations. Specific, okay, mock-up, and this is the result. The last bespoke luminaire was for the Piazza del Lusso. I call it Flintstone luminaire. It's okay, it's sort of specific hole with the module, LED module, and we design a specific shape, specific patterns, and we put these patterns all together. It was a sort of a crazy mosaic, but in the end we realized the luxury path and the Piazza del Lusso, and for sure it's unique all over the world. Can be good or not, but it's unique, and this is design. Eh? Okay.
Came from Seattle, Washington. It's a wonderful place. For those of you that are thinking of moving to Seattle, I'm someone will have me tell you that it's not that nice. It rains all the time, but otherwise it's wonderful. See if we can get the projector going here. We'll jump right in. So while this one's up, I'll start in. I'm going to touch on a series of projects that we have worked on with Delta Light. The emphasis for those projects will be looking at the customizations and modifications of pictures that we've done directly with Delta Light. And really, my relationship started with Delta Light in 2016. I visited the corporate headquarters and met the special projects team with Delta Light. And at that time, we had just finished the roastery in Seattle, Washington. We were visiting with a corporate client, one of the head designers for Starbucks, and we were embarking on the projects for Tokyo, Milan, New York, and we just finished Seattle. And it was exciting times because we had good momentum behind us. I had worked for about 12 years, and during that time I had worked with a variety of in vogue architects on very prestigious projects. And it was about 2013 that I had decided to start the firm Mateo to really deliver tailored projects to clients' needs and really fixate and focus on those project specificities. Neteo means to shine or to be bright. If you're familiar with the measurements in light, right, in nit, comes from Neteo or Netiere. So I thought that was an appropriate name for my firm. It was better than Edling and Associates. And my aim, at least when I started the company, was to be the best firm you'd never heard of, the best lighting design firm you'd never heard of, and that was in part because most of our projects are under NDAs. Probably 90% of our work are under non-disclosure agreements. It's kind of the turf when you're in Silicon Valley. Most of those projects over their life we can't talk about, but fortunately Starbucks has given us the opportunity to kind of talk about some of these projects today, which is a bit exciting. The very first roastery project that we had worked on started in Seattle, where Starbucks had began. It was really this hub of activity. It was meant to redefine the coffee experience, if you will. There's this cask that you see in the background, kind of conceptually rendered here by hand, one of our very first renderings when we first engaged with a client. And then off to the right, you see the green bean storage. The idea is that they roast the beans there from green beans to beans, and you're supposed to get the freshest cup of coffee that you can as the beans shoot out from the roasters and pneumatic tubes out to the bar. The very first project we had completed with them used Delta Light's standard U-turn products. It was on the fast track, so we didn't have time at that point to use bespoke or customized products. But we really we used a warm 2700 Kelvin light to bring out the richness and the luster in the wood, accents under the countertops to light some of the detailing that you see there. It turned out quite nice. It was a big success. In this case, it was fortunate that the wood that we wanted to use was nearly the same depth as the U-turn fixture. So one of the things we always try and do is to have built to purpose, or fixtures that seem as though they're built for a specific purpose in our projects, as though they're tailored for that specific project. And in this case, the U-turn fixture kind of dovetailed out nicely between those joists, so it looked as though it should be, within those wood beams, and it just fit just right. It was also a nice way to disguise some of the other mechanical supply and return elements within there. In Milan, you're familiar with this, right? This is a Princi counter, the first one that was put in the roasteries. So I think Starbucks embraced Princi. The next project I was going to talk about, we're going to go through about 4 projects today, was the Shanghai Roastery. We had a little bit more foresight and time to work on the Shanghai Roastery, so we could be a little bit more deliberate with some customizations and some modifications. Giles Miller is an artist, British artist, and he had done some very interesting, collages of wood hexagons, light and shadow, quite playful. I think it was a good inspiration for a ceiling that we developed there. Essentially, it's wood hexagons that undulate throughout the whole of the store. Given the expansiveness and the complexity of the ceiling itself, we thought that the lighting should be something that was fairly simple, and yet still bring out the warmth that you would otherwise want within the space. We basically relied on small downlights, and if you're a fire marshal in Shanghai, your whole job is to mitigate the risk of fires. So they didn't want any more wood than they absolutely had to have in these particular projects. So we went down to a very thin bit of aluminum that made these hexagonal boxes, and we had basically a configuration where we could mount a light within any one of the locations within these boxes. They could rotate, be taken down, moved up, and put in another position, which is ideal for retail lighting. We paired that with a dolly system, so we could essentially move them about, reprogram them, and change them based on the changing floor plate and the topography of the floor. So we like this idea of organizing the lights within these trios or clusters. It helped, if you can imagine just how much night light they really wanted on the countertops, which was around 200 foot candles, 2,000 lux. It was a fair amount of light, and when you just put those in kind of free-form downlights, it felt like too much. But by clustering them as trios, it actually worked out quite nice. A slight modification to the IMAX fixtures that Delta Light produces, we were able to come up with a very nice copper reflector that, even though the aluminum piece is only 1.5 millimeters thick, it comes down just below that ceiling, and every time it seeds in there quite nicely. And in this case, all of the panels were built off-site, fabricated, so every panel fit precisely with those reflectors. And it was a very nice, clean look in the end. And this was just one section of the bar that you can see there. So the accents below the bar, the accents on the merchandise, in this case, coffee beans and the beverages that they're selling. So this worked well for the bar areas, which were the focal points, and we needed a higher light level there. But when you get to the lounges, you still wanted that warmth that we were getting off the reflectors from the IMAX fixtures in this installation. But we didn't need all of the downlights, right? We didn't need that much light. And when you dim an LED, one of the things that inherently happens is you reduce the CRI, you start to lose the color quality. So we looked at building these lanterns. And at the time, I said the client wasn't a believer that the lanterns were the right thing for the ceiling. So we said, well, just give us a little bit of room, and we'll come back to you. We built a small bespoke mock-up and brought it back to her and showed her how nicely the copper could reflect off of a couple surfaces. So basically, the light source is buried very deep. It bounces off three pieces of copper off a hammer tone piece, and then gradually less hammer tone piece as it comes out. And it creates this really nice warm effect. So the idea is that you get this really nice ambiance of light that is, what should I say, the skin tones and everyone looks healthy, they look good. At the same time, you can really reduce the light levels in the sitting lounging area. So after you've gotten your beverage and you're enjoying yourself adjacent to the bar, you can sit there and relax. I think the fixtures, I think they have many of the lights turned up high. It's actually a much dimmer state when you go there if you ever get the chance to visit in Shanghai. So
what are those pipes on the ceiling?
So those are actually, well, there's a combination of pipes you're seeing there. In the up near us, the gray pipes, those are actually carrying the beans to the roasters. So they actually have a chain bay that pulls the green beans out, carries them through into the roasting machine. And there's a roaster actually just around to the left that you don't see here that roasts the beans. The cooler tubes, it almost sounds like they call them rain sticks, right, in Australia, where you turn them and you feel the beans kind of go down the rain sticks. They actually shoot the beans through pneumatic tubes over your head, and you see them go into these cisterns behind the bar. And this is, again, the idea that you're getting the freshest cup of coffee because you've just watched it roast. It's now shooting through pneumatic tubes over at the bar, and then he's putting that in his grinder, grinding it, and serving you that coffee. They have this here in Milan. We'll touch on that here in just a bit. The La Meride, my French is horrible, right? La Meride, it's in Zhengzhou, China, had this, what I thought was a wonderful ceiling that essentially uses boxes to organize the ceiling. It's quite nice because typically when you have a white gypsum ceiling, you see all of the devices in and around the ceiling, and this gives you a way to hide sprinklers and also a meaningful way to incorporate lights. So when we engaged the owner about how do we want to light your ceiling, we kind of broke it into a kind of a palette of parts, right? What you see on the far left is the more directional lighting, which is what you would be using for retail, right, where it's kind of point and shoot, focusing on the most important elements. In the middle was a combination of those two. So in each one of those cells, we were proposing to have a very directional light, but at the same time getting that glow of that copper. So the principles that we talked about in Shanghai are very much akin to what we're trying to achieve here in New York. You're getting the directional light, the true white light below the ceiling, but you're also getting that glow that makes skin tones look good and offers that warmth. And then when you don't need much light, but you still want the copper glow, right on the far right, we have that next piece of the vocabulary. So we joke this is our rapid prototyping in our office, right? The young designer with lots of energy, you give them some foam core and some copper material, and you begin to kind of play with this and understand how the reflectors work. This is where Delta Light was great. We actually worked with them to kind of shape reflectors a bit and to actually just even do just things as simple as painting the finishes inside of those reflectors. I think we were using the SPY fixture in this particular product, and then kind of playing this one on the left here has a plunger, so we could play with the depth, right, of this, of how it fit in there, and understand, what made that light really glow quite nicely. A simple modification was to use the standard SPY fixture, but we basically created this wood. I've got my laser here. Yeah, we've got this piece that you see kind of run right over the top here. This allows us to kind of accommodate for any depth of wood, because as you're developing these things, you're not quite sure what the shop drawings and the carpenters are going to be producing with respect to the way the wood ceilings are getting put together. So we, in essence, wanted to put together an assembly that had some variability and allowed us to kind of approve a variety of different shop elements within that ceiling. The really fun bit is when you get to mock this up in an office, right? Unfortunately, in this case, we had another late night, right? The electricians wired up just about everything wrong. So we spent the entire night rewiring everything to make it work with the dimmers and so forth. But you play with the, you can play then with the the retail elements, and you know, basically you have pure, unadulterated, you know, 97 CRI, 95 CRI light on the objects themselves, and yet you're still getting that warm copper reflections off of the lights above, and you get the kind of the fun interplay of light that you don't otherwise know or expect, but that just kind of happens serendipitously. So then the next step is you create a quick rendering to share with them. You know, usually you don't have much time, so this is like a few days. You find whoever's talented on 3D Studio Max, and then you get to the end, and you end up with the ceiling. It's quite invigorating. I will say that this picture, I think if you ever get a chance to watch a video of the roastery in New York, it shows the warmth. It's very, very warm light within there. I think this feels a little bit orange because of the photographer, the way the white balance, they've adjusted it. But it's almost a mystery where the light's coming from. You see this kind of glowing ceiling of copper, and you don't, because the lights are all receded up quite deep, you feel the light on the bar, right? You see the warmth, but you don't actually see where the sources are coming from. It's almost the event non-event, right? We were talking, it's nice, but no one really appreciates what it is because no one really appreciates where the light's coming from. But I think that means we've done our job. And talking about the things that Delta Light does for us, you know, we have these concrete columns throughout the space, very shallow ceiling buildups. One of the things it's not the cheapest way to light a column, but we had them modify their standard Super O fixture, camp the actual optics within it, and then basically build us a valence right around the edge that you see here. And that also allows us to basically take, and like almost like a clamshell, right? We take those fixtures now, we put them around the columns, and you have an automatic way to graze the circular columns, which worked out really, really nice. And then similarly, we had a linear ceiling, much like the original, and we play again with our foam core, and we study that, and to make sure our inner reflections with our copper works nicely. We actually had another manufacturer's very kind of discrete fixture. You can't really see it, it's not been photoshopped out, but it's actually providing that punch of light below that you see there at the mock-up, but your eye is attracted to the copper in the ceiling above. I think you can begin to kind of see those lights, just a glimpse like right there and there, but you lose them in the wood as you go down. So again, you get that nice warmth and that directional pure light on the bar while looking good with that warm copper light on your face. So we've kind of gone through the evolution, right? The first Starbucks roastery in Seattle was a very simple design, standard product. We evolved that in Shanghai. We kind of got a little bit more bespoke, some modifications to an otherwise standard product. And then doing similarly in New York with a more involved architectural element. In Milan, we went completely bespoke. The finished palette, I don't know if you've ever had the privilege of, or the pleasure of going to the roastery here in Milan. I know a lot of the Delta Light team has spent many a morning there this week. They really leverage the artisans and the craftsmen here in Italy to manufacture the bar, the wood, the lights, and the ceiling. And we, I should say, everything and all the materials that you interact with. We felt that the lights needed to be on par with all of those elements. And so they're bespoke, much like all the other elements within that space. In the ceiling throughout, there's this patterned ceiling where we have dapples of brass and metal that capture the daylight and help provide reflections so that the ceiling feels lively, much like the floor and the bars throughout the day. We basically utilize the lights in trios or pairs. I think we had the discussion about should we use singles, and we said pairs and triples or trios are more interesting, so let's just stick with those. And we have the supply air actually snuck in here. And if you're ever in the space, unless you're looking for them, I don't think you ever even see the sensors with all the other interesting work that's happening, all the other interesting pieces that are happening in the ceiling. When you do a ceiling assembly like this, though, you can't assemble that all on site. You really need to prefabricate a lot of those pieces. So the collars and the housings all shipped with the ceiling pieces separately. Delta Light helped us make this custom collar piece that actually fits within the single tiles. And they came up with we came up with them with a clever system that allows us to adjust the way that piece fits in there, so you can adjust it for the depth of the exact ceiling system. And then we basically have a more or less bespoke fixture. We use some of the optics of the Pintor fixture from Delta Light to manufacture that. But it allows us a considerable amount of adjustability because as you saw in the image, right, those housings are really rotating a considerable amount. and you can either tuck them up and make them really kind of restricted within those pockets that they're hidden within, or you can take them out and you can rotate them for the desired effect. Again, the brass finish, even though you don't actually see them up close, more than a few feet away, I think even inches away it looks quite nice. Very nice metallic finishes, leveraging the subcontractors and talents that they have there in Belgium, and using elements like thumb screws here, so we don't have any tools when we have to adjust these. Having aimed a bunch of these personally, it's a very nice feature. And then the end result, I think the ceiling and the floor and everything all speak to one another. I think the finish level really is matched on all surfaces. I think it's a very nice end result. There's a considerable amount of light coming out of these fixtures because we have to balance the space. We have so much daylight coming through an atria that we'll see in just a second, adjacent to these big kind of deep spaces, and the interplay of light throughout the day. We have to have a fair amount of output. For the completely bespoke fixtures that we mounted on the columns, we knew that they were going to be exposed, and you were going to see them, right? They weren't going to be kind of mixed in with the other elements within the architecture. So we looked at some historical fixtures and called upon cues, like I call these wing nuts, right? But the hand piece that you rotate there, the bent pipes, and so forth. And we began to develop this concept for what would be our custom fixture that would be beam mounted there within the atria. Again, we thought pairs and trios were more interesting, right, rather than just having singles. It also allows us to have a fair amount of light output from a single, from a fixed location. Initially, when we were modeling this, we just started with one fixture, and this is the 3ds Max model that we initially started with, that we ended up sharing. We turned it into another form that was a little more mechanical. Shared it with Delta Light, and then basically those fixtures went into production. We have one here. There's some adjustment here at the top, and there's some adjustment here at the bottom. But again, the finish is quite nice. Has a deep kind of seated or recessed optic. We put a hexel louver on this. One of the things that I thought Delta Light's engineering did a wonderful job for us on is there's absolutely no penetrations in the back of this housing, and we're getting I think it's around 2,000 lumens initially before you put the hexel and everything else on it, which is a considerable amount of light out of a fixture of that size that looks. I guess, or not towards the classic sensibilities that the building demanded. And this is a good picture showing kind of the warmth on the metals that we have, and you can see those lights kind of mounted both above and below. We had a similar design where that fixture was actually suspended below the columns and the beams. And then we created a smaller one, just like we talked about before, the tubes that deliver those jettison the beans out to the baristas. You can actually see right here. They come down these little tubes right into these little cisterns and give you wonderfully fresh coffee. Well, we used actually one of those pipes actually to mount our lights on that you see right there, to light on those, because once you get that many tubes in the ceiling, there's really no way to light through them. You have to light from them. Which brings me to my last fixture for the night. Delta Light's been a good collaborator with us on the Starbucks projects that I'm able to share with you tonight. We have a lot of projects that we work on personally, and we have needs and desires, and we don't find things in the market. One such fixture was named the Needle. It just got released in their most recent Delta Light Bible. And the idea was, as we wanted the most minimal thing, we always, architects and owners always want the most minimal things in their wood ceilings. On the Pacific Northwest, where I live, we have a lot of wood ceilings, right, with beams and joists within those ceilings. And sometimes you want to be able to get the light source low enough so you're not actually lighting the edges of those joists, and yet you still have some adjustability. So this is actually a sketch from one of our projects. If you can imagine, those joists and beams are expansive across the entire ceiling, and we wanted to have this fixture be able to come down enough so it doesn't light the edges of the beams, but still has some adjustment throughout. You could imagine, right, this was the concept, at least initially, was depending on how deep those joists are, right, basically you can have a tube, right, of different lengths and allow you that flexibility while still having this fixture that's, what, 25 or 30 mils and the minimum height it can possibly be. So we shared with them some concepts about how we would like this to look, back and forth, dialoguing with with Delta Light, and they developed a very nice actuated neck on that fixture to give us some adjustment. And for the project, we kind of have a couple different options, right? We have the pairs that you see here fixed, and then the single, which actually has some adjustment to it, which is nice if you have wall art or other aesthetics things that you need to like. And my personal favorite, which is what we'll be using on its initial project that we're using it for in the U.S., is the Bayonet Mount. So if you can imagine, this will just cleanly mount into a wood ceiling. There'll be no cover plate. The driver's remoted, and it's in my mind, it's like the purest thing, right? It's a simple tube that houses the light within it. It comes down low enough so you don't actually light the joist and the beams that are adjacent to it. And when we need to, we have the flexibility to adjust and aim those lights. So we're quite happy with that result, and I think we're going to find the height may vary on our projects when we have wood joists and buildings, but yeah, I think that's a standard offering that we're going to use quite a bit. I think what we're also finding is one of the trends is that transformers are getting remoted now in a lot of our residential construction, particularly high end. We're putting those transformers, in the basements because the remote distances are 75, 100 feet. It's much easier for the electricians to remote those and then just feed the fixtures. In the US, we call it class 2 power, but something less than 48 volts and 4 amps. And that's it. Yeah. So a little fun that we had when we started the company, we took our iPhones and wrote backwards. It takes a little while to try and write your company's name backwards, if you can imagine, and it wasn't a very warm night. But after a few minutes, you put the camera on a delay, and you can write the company's name. So a little bit of fun there. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys sharing sharing your time with me. I know it's precious, and yeah, I hope you enjoy it.
Hello? Okay, thank you very much to everybody for participating to our speeches. I have to thank very much Dan Skira, Pietro Palladino, and Jason Edling for their amazing presentation. And I invite everybody, of course, to join us in the Delta Light studio for a drink and treats of Maurizio Gubellini. Enjoy the evening, and thank you very much for being with us again. Bye.
Hi.